closed. Budget Committee, you will receive an email from Sammy with direction on how to join a closed teleconference meeting. Budget Committee will set a date for a new meeting to continue the business and adjourn. And if you have technical issues during the meeting, please contact Mandy. And Sammy, I can read the number, but is the number handy somewhere? I can read it, but so you'll have to write it down, I guess. 541-520-6491. And she will do her best to help. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I call this meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. and ask for a roll call, Sammy.
Okay, so you guys are I'm going to kind of go off of the list. You guys can just unmute yourself as we go through this. This is a lot more people than our city council meetings. So I have Mayor Smith is present. Nancy Bell is present. Kyle Blaine is absent. John Fox is present. John Lehman is present. Marcus Alexander is absent. Patricia McConnell, if she's not here, she's going to be joining us later, but I'm going to put her absent at this point. Paul Thompson, I see that you're here. Yes. Terry Dawson is present. Linda Krager is present. Jeff Malam is present. And Sharon Taylor and Todd Waters is present. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Anne, do we have any addition, changes, or deletions to the agenda?
I think the important change to the agenda is that the mayor's comments will come after the responsibilities of the budget committee. And that's not the same on the slides. The other piece is the budget presentations of the departments will follow the slide presentation and not necessarily be in the order that they're listed on the agenda. The staff just agreed to just go with the presentation in the order that it's in.
Okay, thank you. And also, are there any budget materials questions? I think that was to you as well, Anne.
I don't have any addition. I sent out one additional piece of information from Sharon Taylor yesterday.
Yes.
And I told you I would have the URA budget for you today. I'm going to send it at the end of this meeting. I didn't want to send it before the meeting because I didn't want to confuse. So you will get it tonight after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the election of budget officers. And we typically have a chair and a vice chair in case anything happens to the chair. And so I don't know if any folks want to have any questions or someone wants to explain that, but anyone actually on the budget committee can serve in those positions. So it can be a city council member or a member of the public that's on this committee. And currently myself are serving as the chair and Terry is serving as the vice chair. But now we're looking for this round. We can certainly have new officers. So anybody have thoughts or questions that they want to?
Linda,
Yes.
are you willing to continue serving in your capacity if no one else is vying for the leadership role?
I'm always willing to do that if it's something that's a problem for other folks, but I do encourage that other people might want to have a chance and get involved. With the Zoom meeting, I think you have to be visible, though. I'm not sure. So anyone else want to talk or suggest someone to be in those roles or have questions?
Okay, John, you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Is Paul Thompson, Jeffrey Milan, and Megan, they just have telephones? Is that why we can't see them, or do
Yes.
they not know how to?
No. No, they don't have the camera. They're not using their cameras, just that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm certainly willing to hear a motion if there aren't other questions or suggestions for folks to be in these two positions. And I guess I'd ask Terry the same question. Are you willing to continue as vice chair if no one else wants to?
Yes.
Hearing no further discussion, I will nominate Linda as chair and Terry as vice chair for the budget
Okay.
committee.
I think maybe Sharon was going to do the same thing, but in the event that you were not, maybe you have someone else in mind, Sharon?
No, I was going to make the motion. Thank you, John.
All right,
and
would you-
I will second it if that's
Yeah, I
okay.
was gonna say, great, thank you. All right, so now Sammy, in order to vote on this, we have to have a poll of each person or what?
Yeah, can I get the people that are visual? If anybody opposes, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'm going to take those all as yes votes. Paul Thompson, can I get your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeffrey,
Yes.
thank you. It's unanimous. Vote passes.
Okay, well, fortunately, I did practice a little bit on Zoom, so we'll hope we don't have any major issues come up. And of course, Ray knows what to do as well as Sammy, so I appreciate that. All right, so I will continue as chair and Terry is my sidekick again. Thank you, Terry. The next thing would be, I have responsibilities of the budget committee.
Okay, so welcome, everybody. It's good to see your faces here tonight. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you guys are old hats and we did spend quite a bit of training last year, but I'm going to just touch on some high points of what the committee does and what the committee does not do. The budget committee does represent the citizens. As a budget committee member, you hear the budget and review the proposed budget. You discuss the budget, ask questions of the staff, and then make a recommendation to the city council about to approve the budget. What the budget committee does not do is set policy. They do not set salaries or contract terms. They do not decide whether a service or a program of the city will be provided. And you do not have the final vote on the budget. The committee recommends the budget and the council adopts the budget, and they will do that on June 9th. What the budget committee should do is ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. The staff have been preparing for your questions, so please ask them. Make sure that you're comparing the proposed budget with the council goals and focus on the big picture. Does the budget overall support the goals of the city council and the priorities that have been set, rather than digging into individual line items? What the budget committee should not do is discuss the budget outside a committee, because the whole purpose is you're working together as a committee. And so all the information that is shared should be shared with everyone present to the greatest extent possible. Make sure that everybody's receiving the same information. And if you want information from the staff, then it should be asked from the budget committee as a whole. If it's just simple things, if you just have a quick question, you're welcome to email. But if you want the staff to produce a piece of information that's going to be presented to the budget committee, that needs to be asked of the budget committee as a whole. And that's all I have. Is there any questions regarding any of those things that I listed? All right, you guys are old. You're all good. So I guess it's your turn, Mayor.
Hi, Sammy.
I just want to note that Patty McConnell joined the meeting at 6:12.
And then she disappeared again.
Uh-oh.
Where'd she go? You moved her.
No, she must have gone out. She must be having technical difficulties.
Darn.
Okay, thank you.
I think the city administrator just called us old. She might be right. The budget committee process has been a very important part of my goals as a mayor to make it a dialogue between the staff and the committee. I think that it's a very important thing to have our department heads available to the budget committee to be able to have the face-to-face, or in this case, screen-to-screen discussion and questions. It just gives the citizens a lot more opportunity to learn about our city and what we're doing with these monies that we're responsible for. So in spite of the current venue and the COVID-19 aspect of this, I know the staff has put a lot of energy into this presentation that they did manage to give to the city council during our retreat. But now using that same PowerPoint slide and then just adapting because of the venue that we have to use, we're trying to at least get questions answered. And that's been the priority in our emails to the budget committee. That's what we asked. Have your questions ready to be able to get the answers from our staff. As far as the revenues, I just want to touch on them briefly. I know Ann's gonna probably repeat a lot of this or get into more detail, but our main revenues are pretty safe. You know, the state is looking at anything from an 8 to 17% reduction in their revenues, but they're relying on income tax and other things that vary considerably. Our main revenue is property taxes. And even during the 2008 recession, our values did not go down significantly. And actually they were, I think we were like 2% reduction when the state was looking at 8 and double-digit reductions in property values. So I think we're pretty solid and pretty stable as far as our main portion of our revenue. The state shared revenues, again, state's calling for a 8 to 17%, and it could change tomorrow, loss of reduction from these, but that's a smaller part of our total revenue. And we're talking about things like gas, tobacco, liquor, transient taxes, and things like that. So we have a budget before us, and again, Ann will go into that in more detail, that we've been very conservative in using those numbers, but again, it really should not affect us that much. The SDCs is always a one that generates a lot of questions with the new development, and lots of question marks about how the development is going to go on now that we're in the middle of this COVID, and what the response is going to be in the economy as we move forward and try to get beyond this emergency. So the budget, again, is still being very conservatively projected as far as what the developments are that are coming forward. And what we do, obviously, is if the revenues don't come in from specifically SDCs, well, you can't spend them. So we have our financial reports, and obviously our financial budget, the financial officer, which is Ann right now, keeps an eye on that. And if the monies aren't there, then we don't spend them. But we're in a good position And we really shouldn't have any real issues with that. Overall, in the years since I've really been involved, and especially since mayor, I see our planning paying off. And I think it's going to continue to be a priority for us. Visioning and controlling our growth should always be considered a worthwhile investment. It is just something that our staff time and the dollars that we put into it pays off. And it paid off with all of the growth that came forward, and we were pretty much ready for it. We constantly learn, but I think we did real well with the growth that we've had over the last 5 years because of our planning. You know, I always say it, we can't stop growth. The Oregon state law doesn't allow us to stop growth, but we can control it. And I think the Coburg and the citizens have done a really good job in controlling the growth as much as we can the way we want it to occur in Coburg. COVID-19 obviously has created an opportunity really for leaders to unite and create a community-based response that assists our Coburg citizens and businesses. We've put forward economic development money to assist businesses and households. My hope is that this will continue to grow beyond the pandemic response and just be a regular part of our community in assisting those in need with the leadership groups in our community. I want to pay thanks. I want to give thanks to the Chamber of Commerce, the Coburg Community Foundation, Coburg Food Pantry, our Coburg City Council for allocating those funds in the grant program. Our rare participant, Megan Winter, Ann Heath, our city administrator, who put a ton of energy into this grant program and the research and studying. Oregon Rain, all of these groups have come together to put a real leadership core into our community. And again, I think the nicest part about this is this will continue to go on even past the COVID emergency that we're dealing with now. Our conservative and responsible stewardship has always had a concern about economic downturns. Obviously, when we were in general fund deficit, and then in the 2008 recession just created real havoc for our staff and our city. So lessons learned, when we have discussions with staff about growing, we always have that little reminder that we don't want to get to the point where we lay people off. We need to have the people to get the job done, but don't get too fat to where we have to look at a downturn and then say we have to shed some employees. Now, that creates a workload for the current employees. We've run a real lean staff here. When I talk with other mayors and other organizations, and I look at a staff of 16 or less with the budget and the things that we do, most other mayors truly are amazed at what we do as a city of Coburg with the money that we have and the staff that we have. And that is a big kudos to the staff. You know, the council and this budget committee have just really taken a leadership role and taken on this financial aspect of the city and turned this around in 5 to 6 years. And it's amazing where we're at when you look back 5 years ago to now. It's just a whole different world for us. I think one of the things about how lean we run in Coburg is during this emergency, only one part-time member of our staff was considered non-essential. All the rest of them were essential, and they truly were. We need all of these employees to provide the essential services of this city. So again, and recognition to the staff, and we provided that incentive bonus, I'll call it, because of that hard work. I want you to know that, again, outside agencies are amazed at what we get done in this small city with the number of staff that we have. So I think it's a great lesson of our leadership, our fiscal stewardship, and remaining conservative on what we do with our monies and our staff. So thanks to all of you. This is a great opportunity because you are the ones that make a difference here in this city. So thanks again, and let's get on to the next year's budget.
All right. So I'm just going to start with talking a little bit about how we budget at the city. And this is not new. For the last 3 years, we've been using the priority-based budgeting. And that simply means that the priorities are and the goals are set by the council at their retreat in February. There's presentations of the staff. The council have talked with citizens, and we established together a set of goals and priorities. And then the department budgets are created based on those priorities. And then it comes to the budget committee. And it's a circular motion. It continues to be live and be adjusted as we move through the year and into the next year. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Sammy. So these are the same goals that the council had last year. There hasn't been a change to the overall goals. That is purposeful. We're in a 5-year time frame where we are looking at projects that will continue on for several years. And the overall goals haven't changed. They're pretty strong goals. And so what does change is our work plan, which is in the next slide. And I don't expect anybody to read this. It is in your book, but I wanted to show it to you just as a visual of what it looks like, because this is the work of the staff. And as we plan for the new year, these are the projects and the things that we need to get done and that we already are starting to work. Some of these carry forward from 1 year to the next, and they might be on there for 2 or 3 or even 4 years. But this is what the work of the city looks like when it is trickles down from those goals and priorities. We can move on, Sammy. This is another way of looking at it. So this is what we call our bucket list at the staff level. And this represents the projects of the city and everybody that's involved in making those projects happen. And it's substantial amount of regional partners and organizations that we are working on with continually to make those projects happen. So tonight, the staff are going to do a very, very quick presentation of their priorities. It is our hope that the budget committee has read their budget messages and looked at their slides. Because this Zoom meeting can get a little bit long, we're going to just breeze through these. At the end of each department, we will stop and ask for questions from the budget committee. We ask that you hold your questions to the end of the department, and then that department supervisor will offer a time to answer your questions. So as far as the priorities of the administration of the city, our staff capacity and our operational capacity is our #1 investment. Our staff are what keep this city running. And so that is our greatest concern. That we have a staff level that is meeting the customer demands. We want a staff that are all operating on a high leadership level, planning for succession, training our staff, cross-training our staff, and continuing on to meet the needs of the community. That includes what City Hall looks like, how City Hall is set up, and making it a place, an environment that people want to come to. If you look under staff training, this slide was obviously done in February, And it says continue training for emergency response on a variety of incidents. I just want to mention that in our mitigation plan, a pandemic is number 8. So this is not what we've been planning for or practicing for, but we're in it and the staff has knocked it out of the park. And we can move on. So this is just a little bit more of our priorities. Planning for the future, planning for public and private partnerships. When we're looking at our utilities and our infrastructure, we want to be planning out several years so that we can cross-reference our projects. If we're doing a water project and there's a street project also that's possible at the same time, then we want to make sure that we're utilizing that opportunity. We're focusing on the master plans, implementing them to the best of our ability, and just building a very strong partnership in our community for economic development and for the well-being of the Coburg community. So it's important to keep those partnerships going and those relationships going. And so we're working very hard at that. As far as COVID-19 goes, we are continuing to monitor our revenues in every department, but the reality is we don't have a crystal ball. And I pretty much stressed myself out on this. I'm going to be honest, trying to get an idea of what I could tell you about where our revenues are going to go. And the reality is I don't know, and neither does anyone else. There is no easy answer for that. It depends on if this ends in a year or ends in 5 years. One thing that we will do is continue to monitor our budgets, do the same thing we've always done, is shift priorities, be able to be nimble and make decisions to change midstream if we have to, and continue that long-range planning. We want to make sure that we're always working with the other agencies, and we want to make sure that we're collecting all the data we can from this experience so that we can plan for whatever happens next. As far as finance goes, I'm not going to dig into the budget at this section, but we are onboarding a new finance director at this time. We just finished the interview process. We hope to hire by the end of this week. The Finance and Audit Committee has not been able to meet, but when they do meet again, they are reviewing the financial policies of the city and making recommendations for change if needed. We're continuing to use great accounting practices and also having very successful audits. Go forward. And this is your slide, Sammy.
Okay, so we're gonna unmute it. Front office administration. We finally have a full team starting next week when Deandra is back from furlough. And I'm looking forward to having everybody back to normal. Our goals this year are providing excellent customer service and support to our citizens. That's going to be the #1 focus. We'll be working on getting information out in a format that's easily available and online and at your front counter. Utility billing is also done at the front office. It's got more than 600 active accounts now. The staffing increase is going to allow us to spend more time reviewing our policies and auditing accounts and really digging into those 600 new accounts. We're really busy right now with limited income assistance. We have the COVID relief program in utility billing. There's a utility billing rate increase that's coming on. So there's been a lot going on. Hold on. And then for the city recorder, I'm getting settled in my new office and I really like it. Looking forward to having the front office staffed so I can spend this year working on several projects. And projects that we're working on right now, or I'm working on right now, are the virtual meetings, live streaming our meetings. I've heard from several counselors that they would like to continue to have that available on our website. Moving to iPads, implementing a new agenda management software program that'll make our electronic management or electronic packets user-friendly and available for the counselors, the public, and our staff. 2020 general election. We have the mayor and 3 city councilors terms up this year. So that will kick off in June. And then contract audit review and public records will be the focus. Jeff, you're up.
I was going to ask if anybody has any questions on administration, city recorder or front office administration.
Sharon.
You said that you were going to present the budget to Kathy Taylor, but because of the COVID-19, she was not available or something. Has she been able to do that review now?
Yeah, well, we just had to work out how that would take place. And so we're uploading things to her. We're a little bit behind, but she's continuing to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we will move on to Jeff.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize if I go frozen. I've had a little bit of spotty internet here at home. So just know that I'll be back momentarily if I freeze in a funny face. In front of you in your budget books, you've got the budget message that I prepared and also a copy of the slides here. The slides and the budget message sort of work together and they don't really mirror each other, but they kind of work together. As far as what's happened recently, kind of accomplishments and where we're headed, it's sort of an up and down year, sort of this fiscal year ending next month. There was a lot of activity and development that waned at the end of summer and in fall. And so it's been kind of, as far as, well, it's been steady, but not the heavy Hayden Homes steady that was there for a year and a half or so. But that doesn't mean it's going to stay this way. We already have another subdivision in the works. There are, there's potential phase 2 of the mixed use development down the street, the Coburg Inn. There's our future annexed industrial lands across the interstate and highway commercial district just on the other side of Industrial Way from Hayden Homes. It's very active and attractive to developers. So I don't expect, except for economic downturn reasons, I don't expect interest in Coburg to lower in the coming year and years. That's just sort of a, I guess, preamble for the whole focus and needs here. Some of the upcoming projects to focus on will be a build out scenario that we've talked about at a few different city council meetings, and that actually we're going to have a call to kick that off. I believe it's on Tuesday, and what that will entail, of course, with limitations of meeting in the upcoming months, is to have a consultant sort of realize what Coburg could look like in different scenarios should developers come in and develop every parcel possible. So that's just it's a training exercise and just kind of know what policy means and where we might want to go as a community to either keep things the same or change things. So it would be a really informative process. Also, we have a wrap up of our transportation system plan that will take place over the next coming fiscal year. It's already started, but there's been some obvious pause buttons hit. But that will also have some outreach when possible, or a meeting at City Hall. So look for that. We do have a bit of a change in our our building portion of the planning department, and that is we are partnering with a new city to provide our building official and inspector and review services, changing from Junction City to the city of Cottage Grove. And so that's, I don't expect any hiccups necessarily, but there's always at least stress with transitioning to a different arrangement. So that's hopefully no bumps in the road at all. We'll continue to support economic development in the community in sort of a different focus now. It's not what we thought it might be 4 or 5 months ago. It's maybe a recovery focused type economic development policy. But that is some of the ways that the department is focusing right now. Let's see if there's anything on here. Yeah, on the department future focus, sorry, if you can go back, I think one slide or two, right there. I listed number 1, there's a bicycle kiosk. It's been a project that has been in idea concept land for many years. We're looking for ways to fund it. Unfortunately, one of those grant opportunities with Travel Oregon went away, and that's COVID related. They're going to refocus their grant to something that what it was going to be is something different now. But I can say that we have a partner that submitted a grant application in the regional transportation grant opportunity. So that could still happen, and Point to Point which is a division of LTD, submitted that on our behalf. I already talked about the East Side. Let's see here. There's not really anything else that is any focus. I know that economic development section is sort of where Ann and I kind of blend. So I think I've said enough to sort of tee it up. And I think if you want to wait to ask questions at the end of economic development related to planning, that could be appropriate, or if you want to ask them now, and maybe Ann wants to kind of jump into this.
Okay. So at the beginning, oh, yes.
Just a quick question. What's a bicycle kiosk?
That's a good question. It can be a lot of things, but at its base, it is a sort of information stop for cyclists, whether they're touring, leisurely, commuting. There could be a fix-it station there. There could be benches. There could be lockers. There could be electricity, water, all these different kinds of things covered, and bicycle racks, something like that. Just basically a really, really robust information center, but for focused on bicycles.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about economic development priorities. We did start out this year by working with the chamber to develop an economic development committee who was working on a plan to move the city forward as we look at economic development. That unfortunately has been put on the side for a little bit. We will get it going again. But it was really important for the city to start working with our partners and have a collaborative approach that is looking forward as to what kind of a community do we want to retain, the culture and the historic nature of the city while looking at opportunities to enhance the livability, but also jobs and utilizing the lands that we have available to bring in industry when it's a good fit to the community. Sammy, can we go forward? One of the things that the staff has been working really hard on is trying to get some interest in high-speed internet to Coburg, both to our businesses and also to our homes. And we are moving a little bit closer to that. We do have 2 vendors that are interested, and they are working with the Fiber Consortium. and they are working on leases to the dark fiber that is coming to Coburg right now. So don't have anything really excited to share on that, but it is moving in a great direction, and I hope we will have something exciting to share on that pretty quickly. We can go forward again. So it's really important that we do look at our future commercial opportunities. If we are developing 106 acres on the other side of the freeway, that's obviously a property tax base that is going to be very useful to the city. We want to make sure that we are building relationships with available properties. And so this year, the city has really defined how we want to work with those property owners. We are actually approaching them, trying to find out all the information that we can about those available properties, and then we're uploading that into the Oregon Prospector so that that people outside of our community know what kind of property is available in Coburg. And this is mainly in our business industrial areas. And so we're also looking at our infrastructure and development code that is going to continue to enhance and create a very successful business environment. And we can move on to the police department. And I'd actually, if there's any questions regarding anything that I just shared about economic development, I'm happy to answer it. All right.
I think John Fox had a question.
Okay, John?
There we go. I just had a question about, did we know, have any idea about the phase 2 on development of the Coburg Inn project and how that's been sidelined by the COVID-19?
Jeff, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give an update of everything I know. I can say that right around the time of the stay-at-home orders, and in fact, I think just after that, I had a conversation with the owner about phase 2, and the appetite at that time didn't seem to be weary of phase 2. It was questioning what they had some ideas about what they might be able to put in there. So that was, it didn't seem like they were slowing down, except for, as you know, phase 1 took a little while. So slow might be the name of the game for phase 2, but it's not going to be thus yet related to any delays by the current situation.
Any more questions? Okay, we're going to move on to the police department. Larry, please.
Hi, everybody. So you can see the priorities for the police department, of course, is always public safety, maintaining a professional police department, and then tremendous community outreach. So we feel that we need to have a relationship with the community because that's who we serve. Sammy, next slide. Future focus, my big ask is for another police officer due to the growth of the city. It continues to grow. You have the same number of police officers that you had in 2010 when I was hired, when Mike and I got hired. There's just been tremendous growth with Hayden Homes and all the Coburg North being full. I believe Portland State University states that the daytime population in Coburg is about 3,500 people. So with that, you always have a few challenges. So next, Sammy. So what I've tried to capture with 3 full-time officers is what you have for patrol coverage and how our time is divided up. So a lot of my time, at least 50%, is administration, trials, you know, all that information there takes time away from the police officer being in a patrol car driving around the community. So the next slide. Yeah, so there's a few stats. A DUI can take up to 7 hours. depends if it's an alcohol DUI. Those are pretty easy. We can do that in probably 3-4 hours by the time you book the person in to Lane County Jail. If it's a drug DUI, which the majority of stuff is drugs, combination, marijuana, heroin, meth, those take 7 or 8 hours because there's just a huge process to get a drug recognition expert to get called out to the jail to do an evaluation after you do the intoxilizer, and it just takes a lot of time. So total calls for 2019, you can see is about 2,500, and that's about 100. And out of that, there was 1,051 traffic stops. We wrote 531 citations. So traffic enforcement is a big part of our patrol duties. Of that, you'll see the additional calls. We have about 127 calls per month in the city of Coburg. So there's quite a bit of activity. This particular slide tries to show what adding a 4th officer would do to the coverage. And so we would drop the non-coverage times from 29% down to 11%. So the goal as your chief, as always, public safety, trying to get more coverage on swing shift and weekends. And just like when we had the stabbing on Mother's Day, Kevin's still doing reports. He's probably got at least 3 full days into that investigation. So it just, police work just takes time. It depends on the nature of the call. But with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So over time, do we have a sense of how much there's been an increase in police requirements, police calls?
I think it's, I just have the stats that dispatch gave me. So we're moving to a new dispatch center. So we've had challenges in the past to get data. And so I really don't have a comparison for you. I know that with the city growth, it seems like to me that we're doing a lot more serious investigations. It's not just your simple theft and, moving on. So we have quite a few. If you look at the monthly council reports I do, I think every one of them, there's 3 or 4 DHS referrals. Some of those we can go out to the home and get those resolved immediately. Other ones we have to set up interviews at Kids First, and it's continuing investigation.
With the new relationship, might we be able to get more reliable and solid data?
Yes, that's my goal.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, John.
Can you hear me, or do I need to press down the bar?
I can hear you.
Okay, so what is the cost for an additional FTE? And I think you asked earlier that you would need a new police car. And are these 2 items included in the draft budget already?
So we took out the police car because I felt it'd be more important. I mean, we're always going to need to update fleet. The newest car we have is a 2017 Dodge Charger. So cars are getting kind of old, but I think it's more of a priority for another officer due to all the growth. So I believe the vehicle was taken out of the budget.
It was pushed to next year, Larry. I can tell you that the cost for this year for an officer, because it would be prorated to only 8 months, we would not be hiring until the fall months when we see how we are doing as a city come September 30th. There's a lot of unknowns. We want to push most expenditures that we don't need to spend off until after that point. For this fiscal year, the cost would be for the 4th officer about $44,000, and that would grow for a full year to $63,000 in 2022.
And that's salary and all benefits included?
That's just the salary.
Okay, do you have a total cost?
I do not have that in front of me, John, but I could certainly make sure that I can provide that.
And do you already have it currently in the draft budget, or is that to be inserted later?
No, it is actually in the draft budget. So
wouldn't the draft budget include all the
Yes,
other?
yes, I can answer that question quickly. But it will just take me a minute. So I will do that. Maybe if we can push on, and then I will come back and answer that question for you, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions for Chief?
I would just say that I support that position for the new police officer.
Andy, you're up.
Thank you.
Hey, Andy, before you go, this is the mayor, and I just want to, it's been a frustration. We talked about data, and it has been a frustration with our dispatching that we aren't getting the data that we expect, that any public safety would expect from dispatching. So that has been a problem for years, and been one of the issues that I know the chief has been very frustrated with. And at these times of year, we all get frustrated because it's hard to do those. So I know that the chief has been manually kind of keeping his own records, but we pay a dispatcher, and the typical trade expectation is that dispatch is the one that keeps this data, and that's part of the issue why we're switching to a different carrier.
I can share with you that the full salary would be approximately $73,000 for the 8 months. That would obviously change in the new year. The standard load on that salary would be, at this time, it's about 34%. Are there any questions regarding that? All right. Mandy, you're on.
All right, so the court is running smooth, but you know, we had a lot of things hit us kind of this year with Mr. Logan passing away unexpectedly, which was a huge hit to our court, as well as many others. With the COVID-19, bringing on an interim prosecutor, it's been kind of challenging and still kind of challenging. I don't know where everything's going to hit us. That's kind of my concern, is how this COVID-19 is going to affect us. At this time, I've only had 3 people contact me directly or email me, however that is, that either couldn't make their payment due to the outbreak, lost their job. So I haven't seen that quite hit the court quite as hard, other than having to continue our court dates for 3 months. We are proceeding with our June 2nd court date. We actually are pushing 2 court dates in June to help catch some of the backlog. But June 2nd is probably going to be our biggest, and ran very differently. I've already had some concerns from some of the attorneys and whatnot. So that will be interesting how that goes forward. Other than that, our year has been really well. It's been really good. We have attorney Jesse London on right now helping us as an interim city prosecutor. Again, we haven't had court for a few months. I have written up a rough draft of the RFP to proceed with the hiring of the new prosecutor, which doesn't come out of the court budget. That's actually out of the city general fund budget. Is that correct, Ann? Yeah. But because I am the one, me and the judge working with him, I went ahead and wrote that up to get that moving along. We were hoping to have gotten that out by this time, but unfortunately with everything going on, it has not went out yet for, I believe Ann has it to review it, to possibly look at legal, and then hopefully get it out there here soon. That's been a big thing for us. The numbers, looked pretty good. Again, last month, who was really small. I believe our collections numbers were down to like $900, which normally my average is at least 2,000s that we bring in a month. So to be down there, I have a feeling that that's a large impact because of what's going on. I have Judge Williams is still on with us. Back to my priorities. I've completed my move-in process as of January 1 into my new office. And it is so nice to be able to not just stand in a circle and turn around. To have room in my office to bring all the court documents in has been great. I've purchased and implemented the scanning system. We had put on the department priorities that we were going to add in $2,500 of professional services in 2021. But after Ann and I discussed, we are going to hold off on that. Scanning is, I don't want to say it's not a priority, but it's not such a, it needs to be done right now, like our software was. So the 2,500 was to help maybe bring someone in temporary to help me get my documents scanned. But obviously I still have my documents in my court, so I can still access them with no issues. So we're going to hold off on that to help with the budget for this next year, just not knowing the outcome. Obviously the general orders and operations the judge hasn't even been in. I am corresponding with him via email. He is answering people's mail that comes, so it hasn't been had to wait on the back burner for 3 months. So he's been doing that. Obviously I missed, as well as others, all the training that we normally get, which has been a huge impact. I feel like I'm missing something out there, but I guess everybody in that is feeling that. Continue with my court administration certification. I am up for my recertification with my LEDs in January. And then hoping once all this gets done, we have not done any past dues or collection action or anything as far as since this whole stay-at-home order has went into effect. So numbers on any kind of reports for counsel have been absolutely zero as far as sending cases over to collections or even to suspensions. We've just been giving people those grace periods until we get back into court. The other things, again, on the future focus, my court laptop's up for replacement. So that is in the budget for this year. Really, that's the only thing I have that I kind of upticked the amount on my budget line items, is just because I'm next on the list for that repair. Scanning project, it's slow just because I've been working from home and a lot, and obviously I don't have my scanner here. So when I am in the office, I try and scan as much as I can. So that is moving along. I still have 6 jury trials scheduled between July and September when Officer Lee is back. So that will probably hit us hard. When we get the new city prosecutor, Ann and I talked about it, and we don't know quite how that's going to hit us. I think we upped it a little bit, but I think we had enough of a buffer at this time until we know what kind of projections are going to come in, or what they're going to put on their proposals. So until we know a little bit more on that, I have a feeling that Mr. Logan gave us a lot for a little. So I'm hoping it won't be too much more, but you know, that is something that we have to take into consideration. I think, again, you know, my biggest concern is just how this is going to impact us in the future months. Just not, like Ann said, none of us know. I'm hoping it doesn't, but I just have that feeling that along the line somewhere we're going to feel that impact. Anybody have any questions? Mayor?
Are you comfortable with, I know last budget year we increased the judge's line item. Is that working for us? Are we good with that?
It is working. Obviously, he hasn't been in the office. So, you know, obviously, I'm hoping he's taking his time down while he's at home answering these emails or phone calls with me, but I don't know. So we haven't had any kind of invoices from him in the past 3 months. But as of right now, we're only at about half of what we normally project for, or what we've projected for the year. So I think increasing it hasn't had any negative impact on the court at all. And I think he really enjoys our court. So I think that helps.
Well, I know there was a concern that we might lose him. And so that was another consideration for us.
Right.
he's staying with us now.
He has
So,
not said anything further since I put that since I implemented that about leaving us. It sounds like he's reopened his personal practice here in town. So he's no longer searching for a job. He went back to his legal attorney job. And so I think we're secure with him, which I think both Larry and I can say that we're ecstatic about that.
good. Okay, thank you.
That it? I think it comes down to Brian then.
On for a second. Can you all hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
You can hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, took a second. I'm going to shy away from the slides. I'm gonna go off of my budget message. So we can hit the slides if you guys prefer, but I really just kind of want to hit the budget message and kind of go from there. What I kind of want to do is extrapolate some things from the first part of the budget message, and basically go over what we've done in Public Works as team building within the department. And what we've been trying to do is build a culture in Public Works of communication and ownership. And how that translates into the budget for you folks is I feel like if crew members buy into a certain culture, they're buying into not only how we operate, but how we spend money, and how we communicate with our customers. So, and hopefully you guys have been seeing that. I really hope that you've interacted with Public Works over the last 12 months, and hopefully that's been a good experience for you all. We spend a lot of time in people's front yards and backyards on sewer calls, so we get to know folks quite well. The Parks Department, the COVID-19 stuff is kind of, I wouldn't say it's messed with our budget per se, but there are some things that we are finishing up this year that we're going to have to carry over. Johnny Diamond Park, hopefully everybody's had time to go by there and check out Johnny Diamond Park. Trails in Park is finished. We're just waiting on some signage that we had to order. So that'll be taken care of this fiscal year as well. I am going to flip from that screen right there. Okay, that's a little bit more. Streets Department. Does anybody have any questions in the Parks Department? Yes, ma'am.
When do you expect the Johnny Diamond Park to be finished?
We're hoping to have we were hoping to have an opening on Labor Day weekend. I think it's going to be open a lot sooner than that. We feel like Labor Day weekend is about the time people are going to be able to use the park. It will be fully constructed, I would say, by August. We're just going to have to let the grass grow before we allow people in there to recreate.
In terms of parks now, I know there's been some questions online about how much can we use a park? Can we go sit in the park in a lawn chair, or, do we have anything that you could add to that?
Yeah, so right now, our insurance company has told us that to hold off on allowing people to use the playground equipment. You can certainly go down there and throw a ball for the dog, and lay in the grass, read a book. But we just ask that we don't play basketball on the basketball court, and we keep the little ones off the play equipment, and we don't have picnics until the insurance company allows that.
Can I ask a question about tree budget, or is that coming later?
We're gonna get right to the streets.
Okay, well, not streets,
anybody-
but trees.
Well, the trees are in the street department.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll shut up now.
Does anybody have any questions about the parks? Anything specific in the budget? We did budget. I want to mention one more thing. We did budget for a part-time person in the parks department, and that part-time person we were hoping would start July 1st and run through September. Depending on how this budget lands, Ann and I might have to talk about that. We've been talking about pushing capital equipment purchases until October, but having that temporary worker in the summertime would really alleviate, allow another crew member to go do other duties. So we weren't tying up basically 2 public works employees in the parks department all summer long. So that is in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
You have a question from Todd Waters.
My question actually, well, first of all, props for whoever noticed the digital raise hand. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but it is handy when you have a lot of people on the video. But one thing that I was going to bring up was the question that Sharon asked. So I'll wait until we get to the streets section for mine.
So we can move right into streets right now. Just to kind of go over a few things that we've done. There was a lot of questions raised about what we could do on McKenzie and Lincoln Street to kind of slow people down. So Larry and I kind of put our heads together, and what we came up with was I wouldn't say we found a loophole, but we found that those 2 streets in a certain section of town met the requirements for narrow streets. So we were able to reduce the speed limit from the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit to 15 miles per hour. So you all have probably seen those 15-mile-an-hour signs on McKenzie and Lincoln. And I do believe that it's helped. I think it has slowed people down. I don't think Larry's gotten any complaints in the last, so he's shaking his head no. So that's a good thing. We did get some crosswalks on Willamette in our the Lane County Road project from this last summer. And the Public Works Department, what we've decided to do is kind of take the bull by the horns on certain types of repairs instead of farming out certain jobs. And this particular job that I'm speaking of are sidewalk repairs. In the past, that we would have hired out or contracted out somebody to do those repairs for us. We did it in-house. We had to rent some equipment, and we did pay for the concrete. But after looking at things, I believe that we saved about $3,000 doing those repairs ourselves. So that's good. And the guys learned very quickly on the first sidewalk repair we did. And when we transitioned into the other street, the other repair on Willamette, they did a heck of a good job. So I was really proud of the guys for how they were able to do that. The $12,000 for the possible street tree study, That's just a carryover from last year. The council and I believe the budget committee kind of asked us to look into what it would take to manage the trees, what condition the trees are in. And after talking to the arborist that the city uses, I think that we're overshooting that quite a bit. He's willing to come in and do an analysis of the trees that we have and focus in on bringing canopies down and checking the health of the trees. And after talking with Bruce, I think that $12,000 is kind of high, but I wanted to leave that in there because of the unknowns. There's could be things that we just don't know. We might have to have some more surveying done on right-of-ways to see where those trees land. And because we certainly don't want to be working on a tree, one, that doesn't belong to us. And two, obviously we don't want to spend, ratepayers' money on something that we don't own. So that was that is what the $12,000 for the study was for. Does anybody have any questions? I know there might have been a question regarding that early on. Did that answer your question, Linda?
Well, is that okay?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that last year we had a big discussion about trees and we actually moved money into the budget for a tree study. And one of the issues was what belongs to us and what doesn't. Was that study done this year? Or is that ongoing now, or where are we with that?
I would say that it was partly done.
Okay.
And when I say partly, it was fairly expensive to get some surveying done on North Coleman. I think we did Lincoln and McKenzie, and I want to say Mill Street. So now we kind of have a good idea of which trees we own in that area. Now, that was just one part of town, right? And we really didn't. The only information we got out of that is where the right of way was. We didn't really get condition of the trees or anything like that. So now this is going to be an ongoing thing. I don't know if this is something that we can just take care of in one budget year. And it could be, we did some rough math, and if we did take out 150 trees, and well, let's just say that there was 150 trees that needed to be removed. Well, that's between $3,500 and $4,500 per tree, so it adds up pretty quick. Now, I'm not saying that 150 trees are going to need to be removed. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is some major work that needs to be done on these older big leaf maples.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
I was just going to follow up on that too, because I had a question that revolved around that. And so the first part was answered in Sharon's question around whether this was a carryover from last year's discussions. And then the second part of my question was just the call out of the use possible study. So I just want to know maybe why it's not. I understand that it could take multiple years, and so some of it happened last year, and then some of it could happen this year, and some could happen in other years. But maybe just talk to me a little bit about why it's called out as a possible study as opposed to just actually being a study that's planned for in the year that you're asking for. Well,
The reason why I stuck possible in there is because after talking with the arborist that we use, a lot of that might work itself out with him. I'm struggling to come up with the right way to put this. For him to review each tree, right? So instead of actually putting this out for an RFP, Bruce is willing to actually look at those trees, and figure out what needs to be done with each tree in town. There are some that he would like to see removed, and there are some that he thinks with heavy trim and bringing the canopy down, we can add to the life of those trees. And that is our ultimate goal, is to kind of extend the life of these older big leaf maples. So that's why the possible was in there.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand correctly, it's possible because we may be able to just not do the study altogether because the arborist can provide us with information that would circumvent that. So, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
The mayor has a question.
I'd just
Yes,
like
sir.
to add to that I know that we have an old tree study. So there is a list of trees. So we're not starting from scratch on it. And we have eliminated some of the trees, or they have eliminated themselves. So it's really an update of the list. And I understand that, this can be an ongoing. And so it's nice to hear that the arborist would be able to take that list and work with it, because the previous study does have this grading system on how these trees are rated by whoever the arborist was at that time. So hopefully, as Brian's saying, with our current arborist, he could look at that and pretty well update it without spending a full $12,000 to do that. So, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody remembers that there is an old study that had 180 some trees. And one of the questions was, are they the cities or are they a private property issue? And then the other one was, we need to update what the status of those trees are by an arborist. So we do have a lot of information.
Just to kind of put it in perspective, we are removing a tree as we speak at the end of Maple Street, believe it or not. We're removing a big leaf maple on Maple in front of Archuletta's house on Maple. This tree has had, to my knowledge, 4 major limbs fall out of it. One actually on their house, I believe one on a car, one just 3 weeks ago, and then one prior to when I took over as well. So, and sometimes people, they're really attached to these trees, understandably. They're old, they're tall, they're beautiful when they leaf out, but they, when they lose a limb, it can be quite dangerous. And Archuletta's, for the longest time, they just didn't want the tree removed. And this last time, I think that was it. They finally agreed with me that, it's time for this tree to go and replace it with another tree. So that's what we're doing right now. And that Public Works is hauling off the wood, and the arborist is removing the tree. And that tree, I'm hoping, comes in at about $3,500.
I just
So
want to
that
say
kind of-
thank you, Brian, because I used to live next door to that tree, as most of you know, and I have seen all 4 of those limbs. The last one was very lucky. It missed motorhomes, it missed cars, it missed homes. Out of those 4, and these are branches that are over 12 inches in diameter. The one that fell into his house, the other 2 did damage cars, totaled a classic 64 Falcon. So that's relative to what we have throughout the city. And Mr. Archuleta loved that tree, but thank you for talking him into, I think nature kind of helped us with that one, but that tree needed to go.
I'm not going to take any credit. I think it was his wife that talked him into it.
Good. Well, I'm glad to see it going.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I have a question. So with the surveying that has been done, do we know what trees belong to the city and which belong to property owners?
I believe that there's 2, I'm not an expert, but they're fir trees. I would call them Douglas fir trees, but I'm not an expert on that type of tree. There are 2 fir trees that are not ours, and I believe those are on Lincoln. But the majority of the other trees are in the right of ways. Most of the big leaf maples in town are in right of ways or are in a area. And this is where it kind of gets dicey. Some of those big leaf maples are growing, straddling property lines in the right of way. So, what do we do with those? Do we accept responsibility and take care of them? I think that's probably the most prudent thing to do. I would hate to get into litigation over who owns what tree. I think if we just, take care of the trees, I think that, it'd be hard to prove whose tree is whose when it grows halfway over the property line. But that's my take. Now, the city administrator, city attorney, the mayor, and the city council, they have the ultimate say on how we handle those certain trees. But it would be my recommendation that we just manage them. I think it's cheaper in the long run to take charge of those trees.
So Brian, I have a question. Can
Yes,
you hear
sir.
me?
Yep.
So the tree on Maple that was on city property that had limbs fall and damage personal property, is that our financial responsibility? Does our insurance kick in to cover that, or is it considered?
They do consider that an act of God, is what the insurance company calls it. Now, we kind of let, if something happens on a piece of property, there is an investigation through our insurance company. They basically want to know if we've done any work to that tree, and I think it's the last year, the last 2 years, last 3. I think it goes up to 5 years. And if we can show that we've done our due diligence in maintaining the tree with some sort of maintenance, typically we don't have any issues. And I can't think of anything that we've had to pay out. Can you, Ann? Sure.
In all the years that I've been involved with this, I don't think our insurance has paid out on anything regarding trees.
That's my understanding as well. But that doesn't, the one of the things that does keep me up at night here in Coburg are the street trees. It is the one thing I every time the wind blows in the summertime, or we get a heavy rain, a summer rain, and the wind starts to blow, I get kind of tight in the chest because I just know that a tree is going to come down. I just know it. And that's happened at least once every summer since I've been the public works director. So I don't want to take up too much more time in the streets department. Does anybody have any questions?
John Fox had a question, Brian.
Yes, sir. I can't hear him, Sammy.
Can you hear me?
I can now. Yes, sir.
So this survey that took place seems like 10 years ago now, and all the trees are tagged. They have a tag, and there was a life expectancy or who was the most first to go. Is that data has been shared with, is our arborist Nelson? I take it it's Nelson's Tree Service.
Yes, it is Nelson's Tree Service. He and I have talked about this list. I wasn't around when this list was created, but I can tell you that it was created by some well-intended college students. I can't remember if it was the U of O or OSU.
U of O Extension Service students, yes.
Okay. So they were some well-intended people, but I think what Bruce and I have figured out is they tagged a lot of trees. And some of those trees may or may not have been city trees. So there is a list, and but Bruce and I are working together on trying to use that data and recreate a better list, I would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've seen that list, and it's a numbering system, and when you read the index to it, it's very confusing. It's really hard to make sense out of how they graded the trees. But we do have a list of trees. But the biggest part of it was some of those trees aren't ours, and then trying to figure out the grading system. And yes, you can go look at the tree and kind of figure out, okay, these numbers represent that. So it's an iffy grading system, and it does need to be updated, and hopefully we can move forward on that. And I agree with Brian. Every time a windstorm comes up, I just get a little tight in the chest because we know a tree's going to come down. So it's more and more of a priority. And I think, we're in the right direction. We've got an arborist that is going to help us with it. And I think that's the big part. So I appreciate the effort that Brian has put into it.
Does anybody else have any questions in the street department? Does anybody want to talk about the equipment, the new service truck that we've put into the street department? And the only reason yes, ma'am.
I'm hitting unmute and it remutes. Yeah, I think that was actually in the water department, but there was the budget for a new truck. Is it new, or are you looking at used, recently?
Yeah, so we'll get to the water department in a second, but yes, there are two service trucks, one in the water department and one in the streets department. And yes, what we've found is if we buy new lasts longer. And to kind of put it in perspective, we just spent $10,000 on the Ford service truck. We had to put a new motor in it. That was a used vehicle that we purchased, I want to say, for $8,000 3 years ago. So, we spent $8,000 3 years ago. Now we're putting $10,000 into it now. So used is good if you can get a good used vehicle. But what we've decided is I think it's in our best interest to try and buy new, low miles.
Because I know that the police department quite often will get a used vehicle. And so.
Correct.
I'm asking.
And those capital equipment purchases, like Ann stated before, those are going to get pushed into October till we can see how this COVID-19 really is affecting our budget.
Brian, I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
And it is about, we've talked about this before, it's about having a shop or having something that keeps our vehicles out of the weather. And I'm not necessarily saying we need to look at that this year, not knowing what's coming, but that we keep that in mind as we go forward, because that just prolongs the life of all of your vehicles. And perhaps the fire department had some, you talked about maybe before partnering with them. So can you address that?
I can. In the beginning of my budget message, I put a little part in there that you're not going to see in this fiscal or this 5-year budget an operations center. But throughout the year, the city council, throughout the fiscal year, the city council will most likely hear why that need is becoming more of a reality as time goes by. And one of those realities is weather aging equipment. That is a real thing. if we can get that equipment, that rolling fleet indoors, we feel like that equipment lasts longer. And I think that that's just a proven fact. So this time next year, in that 5-year budget, you're most likely going to see us stick an operations center in there somewhere. Whether it's year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, you're going to see a request that we start looking at that. And I really hope that the city council and city administrator, that we all kind of buy into this, and we all try and figure out a solution for public works. I think Ann is really, we've been talking about it, I wouldn't say on a regular basis, but quite frequently, about how and where that operations center would be located, what it looks like, and but we haven't really talked cost yet. That's why we haven't got anything in the 5-year budget. But yes, it is definitely right now, because of COVID-19, my crew and myself are meeting in the blower room of the wastewater plant. Well, let me say that one more time. My crew and I are meeting in the blower room at the wastewater treatment plant because we don't have a room big enough to keep the 6-foot distance. So we're back there trying to have meetings with the blowers, the air compressors, and all the different pumps operating. It's not easy, but we're doing it, and that's because that's what we have to do. Yes, ma'am.
Can you meet in City Hall?
We probably could. Operations take the crew. Let me explain, Sharon, how the crew shows up every morning. We meet at the treatment plant. The guys change their clothes in the locker room. We kind of stagger things out. The guys change from their street clothes into their what we call our uniforms, and then we have a morning briefing, and we talk about everything under the sun in a morning brief, and then we go to work. So that morning briefing, yeah, it could happen at in the council chambers at City Hall, most definitely.
Brian,
Yes.
John Lehman has a question.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any activity by the fire department on the memorandum of understanding or the intergovernmental agreement with the property? Have they moved forward on anything that they have for the property?
Yeah, we're anticipating the contractor is probably going to get started. We anticipated this week, but I'm guessing he's going to wait for the holiday weekend to be over. So they're going to be installing a water line to the back side of the property for the fire department to use. The front automatic gate has been installed. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of activity. We had a pre-construction meeting with the contractor and the fire department last week.
Okay.
I just want to hit a couple highlights in the water department and the sewer department, if you guys don't mind. I know this is dragging on, so if you want me to talk quick, I can. The water department, one of the things that we did this year is we brought to City Council bumping up the water meter replacement program. We felt like instead of dragging that out another fiscal year, we wanted to get it done. And we're almost done with the commercial meter installs. So all of the residential, majority of the commercials have been installed. And now we're just kind of getting the stragglers. So far, what we have found is there's quite a few accounts that have noticed an uptick in usage, and we believe that is solely the result of older meters are less accurate than newer meters. So that's what we've seen a few of those calls. And so the new metering system, the meter reader is able to read the radio read meters. And I think the longest it's taken us after we've worked out a few of the bugs was 30 minutes to read all the meters in town. So we went from 2.5 days to 2 days, now to 30 minutes. And the reason why I wanted to bring that bit up is you guys have probably seen some equipment purchases over the last couple of years. And you probably wondered, well, why are they, what are they doing? Why are they wanting this? And one of the reasons is, here's an example. We just bought a trailer that has an automatic dump on it. And the reason why we bought that is so when the guys are mowing, they can put the grass clippings right in that trailer and haul the grass clippings out and dump the grass clippings. And they're not spending time dragging grass clippings out of the back of the trailer. And so we're reducing possibility of injuries, and we're increasing workers being able to go do something else with the time that they save. So we're all about trying to save time in public works. So if we have to spend a little up front to save time to be able to go do other things, we might be able to stretch out not hiring another public works employee for maybe another year or two. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So that was just one of the big things we did in the water department. Obviously, we have water projects coming up this next fiscal year. So we're going to be kind of busy with those over the next 2 or 3 fiscal years. So we're pretty excited about that. The sewer department. One of the things that we're going to be working on with the city of Eugene is hopefully we can come up with some sort of IGA with the city of Eugene. We feel like we're getting to the point where we need to probably buy our own pumper truck. And the reason why I say that is I believe that in the next 3 years, we're going to see an uptick of tanks that need to be pumped. So if we're budgeting $75,000 in 2 years, and I want to say that I'm just pulling a number out of my out of the air right now. If we budget that much in 3 years, well, that's the amount of a pumper truck. So we can actually take 75,000 and buy a pumper truck. We still have to pay dumping fees, but that first year the truck's paid for, and now we can reduce that every year tank pumping line or tank maintenance line back down to where we're just paying the dumping fees out of that line. Does that make sense? So in the long run, I think we'd be saving a lot of money year to year. So that's just one of those things that, we might have to spend money in order to save money down the road. I know that maybe it doesn't make much sense, but operationally, it makes a lot of sense.
Brian?
Does anybody? Yes, sir.
It does make total sense. And I know you and I have talked that, if you can buy a lawnmower that goes 15 miles an hour instead of 10 miles an hour and make the crew more efficient, then we need to be doing that kind of thing. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. And I admire that and I appreciate it. And the pumper truck is another part of it, even going beyond just the normal routine maintenance of tanks and stuff. But when we have an emergency, to be able to have that tank available to us, that truck, to be able to pick up and confine a contamination issue that we may have down the road, can save us. I write checks all the time. I sign checks all the time for $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 on these pumper trucks. And I totally agree with that line of thought that we should be looking at our own equipment, because number one, we have it and it gets there fast. And number two, it's probably going to save us money.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done is we've taken a hard look at a non-CDL pumper truck, and we can get a non-CDL pumper truck for that, you know, $75,000, $85,000 price range. So the crew doesn't necessarily have to have a CDL to operate that vehicle. The other thing is we have to start looking down long term. What do you do with a pumper truck? Well, in the wintertime, we can't leave that outside, so we'd have to store it indoors. So, you know, we either obviously have to find some sort of operation center where we can store equipment inside, or we buy a truck that will fit in the shop that we currently have. So, you know, there's some hard decisions that are going to have to be made in the next few years regarding operations center. And I don't want to take up too much of the time tonight because frankly, it's not even in next year's budget. But I just kind of want to plant that seed every year that we talk that at some point, this is going to be a real conversation that we have to have. Because as this town grows, you're going to need that operations center. Does anybody have any questions on sewer?
Councilor Fox.
Yes, sir.
So last year we had an incident at my house where it turned out that the alarm hadn't been activated on the whatever that device is called. And
control panel. Yep.
Thanks, the control panel. So it's a database question, and that was a surprise to you. It had the original, didn't have the padlock that all of them should have now. So the question is, do we have an inventory of the control panels that, you know, that they are activated, that we know that they're properly functioning, and that they all have the updated locks?
So that's a great question. And the answer is two parts. Yes, we are working on that type of database. So what we've done in Public Works is we've kind of modernized how we handle work orders. So we purchased some software that helps us manage the wastewater department. And now we can enter every site into this database through GISing. And we can, you know, so it's somebody's going to ask me what GIS means, and I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, yes. So there is a database being compiled. It's not fully operational yet, but we are working on that. The second part of that is one of the reasons why we're trying to save time in other departments is so we can free up operators to do the inspections that are required of us. If you look at the inspections, we did 101 site inspections last year. That should actually be 250 sites inspected. We should be, or actually it should be 200, I think it's 280. We should be doing every site every other year. So half of the sites this year and half of the sites next year, and then we revisit the third year. So that is actually in our permit through DEQ. We're missing the bar big time. We've been lucky. They have not done any type of enforcement on us because I think they know that we're trying as hard as we can. So as we move into new developments, the 110 acres across the freeway, and the new subdivision that is most likely going to go in at North Coleman. What you're going to see from Public Works is an ask of another operator. And we're just going to have that. There's just no way that we can maintain the system with the workload that we have currently that we're behind on. I think that you guys have all seen the Public Works crews out there working extremely hard, and they do. They're a great crew. but they're working at capacity right now. And when we add those developments, that's just going to be added workload. So that's the answer to that, Counselor.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Geographic Information System, and that came from Sammy. Thank you, Sammy.
John Lehman, did you have a question for Brian still?
I just wondered if we had a price range for the operations center.
No, I do not. I don't even want to speculate how much that could cost, because I could be, way off the mark. So I think as we get closer to that time, that time to start thinking about that, maybe in 6 or 7 months, when Ann and I sit down and we start thinking about the next year's budget, that might be something we bring to you next year.
I think there's another part of it too, is to figure out what we really need in the operations center. And that, that will definitely depend upon where we end up building it.
Correct.
The obvious look right now is the sewer plant, but it's far, far away from the city. So if we have other opportunities or options available, well sites or other things, we look at those. Or maybe it might be beneficial to build 2 buildings. There's just a lot of options out there. So it's not time to put numbers on it yet. It's the time to look at what the opportunities are and then figure out how we're going to get
I think just acknowledging the need, or knowing that need or that ask is going to be coming down the road. Like I said, I just want to plant the seed, and hopefully you guys you'll understand when it comes time to write the check. Does anybody else have any questions for Public Works? I know I took up a lot of your time. I'm very sorry about that. I wish we could do this in person. I feel like I'm a little bit better in person than I am on Zoom.
Brian, I'm just going to say, in person, you took just as much time, because it's not you, it's us asking the questions. You've got an awful lot in this city going on, and we have a lot of questions of you. So every time you need to know that you're going to take a lot of time, because we expect that. So don't apologize.
Well, for me personally, I just want to say thank you. From my crew to you, because I think that over the last couple of years, you guys have been very, very supportive of Public Works, and we really, really appreciate that. And we just wanted to acknowledge that with the Budget Committee. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just quickly say that we are continuing our emergency response priority. The staff has been fully trained for responding to emergencies, and we continue to do that. Jim Bill is continuing to work with the staff and has been very instrumental in helping us move through this COVID-19 pandemic, planning, bid edit meetings, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to plan for other incidents, and that is what Jim and his CERT team will continue to do. So Jim is putting his perspective on the chain reaction of the COVID-19, which all of us have. It's a big question. So I'm gonna start summing up the budget. This is a short summary of the budget, and below I've put some comparisons. So our budget this year is a little bit smaller than last year's, and as far as dollar amounts. And if we go to the next slide, Sammy. This is kind of a wrap-up comparison of 2 years. And I put the graphs on the bottom so that you can see that we're really trying to maintain a steady budget this year. Because we don't know what's happening, we've tried to maintain the materials and services budgets to as close as we can. We've tried to hold our revenue steady, not anticipating more than we think that we might receive. And just overall, just trying to maintain the budget of the city steady. And so this graph really shows that we are indeed doing that. Overall, the budget is $578,000 less whole city than it was last year. That does show an overall ending fund balance drop of $483,000. Mostly that is attributed to capital outlay projects that have been happening at the city. We had a major water project happen down on Pearl Street that utilized water SDCs. We also have a park project going on. And so we are project heavy right now, definitely other water projects going on. So overall, the budget is down, but we are maintaining a very level basis for our budget from last year. And we can move to the next slide. In the general fund, again, the budget appropriation is lower. And that is really, we had some capital outlay projects this year that we won't be having next year, and that more than covers that difference. The ending fund balance of the general fund actually grows at the end of this year. And again, the graph, we're kind of just trying to maintain a steady. It's a little bit different, but just that is our focus. In the street, it's a little bit different. The fund balance of the street has actually improved. But we do have a project in there this year where the projects of the street are really difficult right now to even think about because we don't know what's going to happen with gas tax. We obviously had to put the TUF on hold, and we don't know when we're going to get to revisit that again. And so we will take on projects as we can. So one thing that I can say is for the first time since I've been here, the street fund has a contingency in it for next year. And that's a big deal. That is a huge deal because it makes all funds of the city have a contingency now or a reserve. What we call our reserves spent only if we absolutely have to during the year. So in the street fund, we are in the water fund, obviously, we're trying to maintain the budget as well. It's a steady budget, 5-year project budget. The water fund ending fund balance is obviously dropping because we are in a project stage. There was SDCs spent out. But overall, we're going to be working through those project years and trying to keep our expenses down as much as possible. And anyway, so and in the sewer fund, again, steady budget. And the graphs just really show that we're just trying to maintain that through the next few years. And I hope that's helpful. Overall, the ending fund balance, if we look down at 217, we were climbing out of a pretty good hole. We ended up in 219 with a substantial ending fund balance. Part of that had to do with some SDCs. Part of that had to do with a great tax collection that was far above what was expected. But as we get through to 2025, the general fund balance does continue to go down, and that's something that we will have to address. We are maintaining the $250,000 reserve in every year. So this is above that, but you can't ignore the fact that it's going down. The only thing I have to say is, while we have budgeted our materials and services pretty realistically and our staffing realistically, the increase in property tax revenues, we are probably very conservative on that because we really don't know what's going to happen. It all depends what will happen on the other side of the freeway, what kind of buildings will go in there, what will the values of those buildings be. We don't know until that starts developing. So it's really hard to project out what kind of property tax revenue increases we're going to see. And so I think that's a good thought to have. The other piece is the new subdivision. What values will those homes have? And so we're not really clear on that yet. And that will be decided when the county assesses those properties. So I think that we've been conservative with property tax revenue growth. And we're being very realistic with the cost of personnel and materials and services. So we are seeing a decrease in the budget. We continue to maintain and monitor this. This is the beauty of a 5-year budget, is that we're looking out and we see at the end of the 5 years, we're going down, and so that's, we need to be realistic about that. I always love sharing the final budget presentation slides from past years because it's been a ride. It's certainly been a ride. And we went from thumbs up, we're heading in the direction, and we were having some, doing well, working together. Last year's theme, if we can go forward, together, let's reach new heights, thoughtful planning, quality services, maintaining our culture, informed and engaged citizens, and enhanced communications. We've worked very hard on that this year. We've upped the amount of small newsletters that are going in the utility billing, where we have our social media growing, and we're working on the website. There's a lot of work to do on the website, but we have a plan for that. And so, so for this year, my final message for the budget is let's stay the course. We're doing well. We have a good perspective on running the city, what it's going to take capacity wise to run the city. And even though we don't have a crystal ball to know where COVID-19 is going to take us, I think we're in a good place. And I think that we have good practices in place that as long as we continue to maintain those practices and be good stewards of our city, we're going to be okay. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the budget or anything else. Sharon.
Just something I wanted to point out. You know, we've talked about property taxes, and I know, Ray, you said something about it being, you know, a major part of our revenues. But in actuality, if you look at total revenues of the city and total property taxes are only 12%. So I think you have to keep that in mind, that even if we add new properties, be it industrial or residential, you're not going to get a huge bump in revenues. And so I realize that, you know, we're talking different funds and all. It may increase the general fund to a certain extent, but overall revenues are not going to go up hugely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was looking at that, and thank you for bringing that up, Sharon. The fixed revenue of the property taxes that was affected by so many other agencies, we fortunately didn't feel back in 2008. But just looking at numbers comparing my taxes, I would suggest that there's probably an average of only anywhere between $1,000 to $1,500 per new residence that's going to go into the city coffers from property taxes. So those aren't big numbers. And, you know, the other issues that we have, our utilities fees is a bigger revenue. And once again, we hope that's stable too, just like our property taxes. So we do have a fairly stable revenue source as far as what we work with. And I'm just, you know, I think that Ann is doing a good job of really being conservative on those projections and talking with the tax assessor and the state about what kind of revenue drops from other sources we would be looking at. I think we're in a very conservative position, and that makes me feel comfortable as far as the projections that we have for revenue anyway.
My concern is the continuing drop in the general fund. You know, this downward trend is concerning to me. So I don't know, frankly, if we should hire another police officer, because, you know, that's a really large lump sum. And if we're talking about these other things that we're not seeing in the 5-year budget that we're going to need, like, you know, the public works building or something else, then where do we get that? Because it's just not there.
And I agree, the concerns about the building and other issues, again, those are utility based that we would look at, but I agree with you, the concern about the shrinking general fund. And we've been able to do some transfers, especially to streets, that have been general fund transfers into those others. And I think we need to really start looking at those things, especially as far as the public works aspect, when we're putting money into equipment and we have a lot of staff there. And an operations center is just one more thing that's going to create an efficiency. If we don't do those things, and like Brian said, we end up starting to wonder how we're going to do this, put more staff on, buy more equipment. Those are all issues that really need to be looked at and planned hard. This year kind of really just put us on hold for now. That I think with the department heads continuing to talk about the priorities of the city and our council setting those goals, we do need to look at those things for the next 5 years. But I think we're probably looking at 2 to 3 years for a lot of actions on these things that are pretty expensive. And once again, it's going to depend on what the development does and what our future revenues are. And without that crystal ball, it's so hard to do that. And especially under this pandemic issue, we really do need to look at these future needs, and particularly public works and I believe public safety. I wished we had statistics for more of those things. Brian has some good ones with the inspections that aren't being done because of the work that he's, you know, his staff is maxed out. That's a concern. And the public safety, when we read the monthly reports, that's a concern with arrests from the police department and our interactions, which seem to be getting more serious. And that's certainly a concern that I hear from the citizens now. So yeah, it's an element of planning that's going to be really hard, and yet we're holding the mark right now, but we're holding the budget for what we had last year. But we're also hearing an awful lot about what we need, and so we do need to be careful about that.
Okay, is there anybody else that has any other concerns or questions?
One more. I noticed we reduced the water fund contingency by 400,000 this year, was it?
Yeah.
What was that about?
Well, it's just the water fund is, so we're in the middle of a project. This year will be a substantial project year. And I leave in there what I can. When I'm looking at the overall budget of the department, it begins to grow again next year when we can add a little bit more into contingency. But for this year, I just figured that we needed to be pretty conservative about what we leave in there.
Okay, yeah. I just was wondering why we had to spend down that much.
We have a major project in this year.
Okay.
Okay, is there any information that we did not provide for the budget committee that we need to bring back to you next year? Is there any information that you were looking for that you did not either read It wasn't in your book, or you didn't hear it from your department heads. Counselor Lehman? Your sound is not on.
Now, since I hit the bar.
There you go.
So maybe for next year, maybe a list of the top 10 increases in the budget, just as an overview for us to see it in that kind of a form. And or maybe a list of the top 10 budget reductions, just as an overview to look at. And maybe by the amount or percent and what the reason or justification for that would be.
Okay, are you looking for those for next week, or are you looking for those for next year? Because you said next year.
I meant next year.
Okay, all right.
One quick thing, there's a lot of acronyms in here, and I don't always know what CERT means or some of these other acronyms. A key would be helpful.
Okay.
I have a request for next year.
Uh-huh.
So, Anne, when you opened, one of the things that you mentioned about the role of the budget committee is to ensure that the budget asks align with city council goals.
Mm-hmm.
And we have those goals at the front, but sometimes it's difficult to just A, remember all of them, and B, just flip back and forth between specific presentations for budget requests and then what those goals are. So maybe my ask would be, inside of the budget message, which was incredibly helpful and I really appreciated, having the public works director or the planning director, like everybody who directs that, assigns the specific ask with how it supports a city council goal for that year. That way we can have it right there in front of us for each section. And it's easier for us from a budget committee perspective to be able to understand the importance of that ask as it relates to supporting the overall goals of the city council.
All right. It's a very good ask. Thank you. So for next week, the responsibility of the budget committee would be to hold a budget hearing, because the state says we have to, for the state shared revenue that we receive. And then a recommendation of the budget. There's a couple changes. One of the things I will be sending you the URA budget. One of the things budget change that you'll see next week is, after doing the URA budget, which I got to very late, and I apologize about that, I realized that the amount that we were hoping to transfer into the sewer is not going to work. I'm going to have to drop that. So that next week I will have a list of changes to the budget. There's only a few that I would present to you, and present you another final budget summary for adoption. The other one I sent you was that we just need to move the interest on City Hall over to debt and out of materials and services. So that is what would take place next week. So the meeting next week could potentially go very quickly. And so with that, any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But if there's no other information that you need, I won't be sending anything out but the URA budget. One of the things we did last year, that if you want to do it this year, is if you get home tonight and you think of a question, then go ahead and email it to me. And what I did was, when I answered the questions, I sent them out to the entire committee, so that everybody saw the question and everybody saw the answer. And if that was helpful to you last year, then I'm happy to do that again this year during this week, or I'll just answer them all next week at the beginning of the budget committee. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Sharon?
Yeah, that's fine. But it sounds like, because there's a few changes, and I think you were gonna balance out the allocations and things like that. Are we not gonna get new sheets to put in our books to look at ahead of the meeting?
I could send out a new budget, but the 11 by 17 are hard to send. I'll send you out new summary sheets.
Okay.
Yes, I can definitely do that.
And
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. As I went through the budget book prior to this meeting, I saw that we need to look at website administration. I heard Mandy talk about needing help for scanning, but maybe that was put off. And let's see, there was one other thing. Something for economic development. I wondered if we are looking at increasing FTEs other than, I know Mandy was going to put that up. Is it going to be one person that we could split between those three items and also give backup for front desk?
Yes.
Just a question.
So in this budget,
I'm done.
In this budget, the FTEs in administration are 2.8. It's the same as it was last year. So right now we have Megan, our intern, who will be with us through the end of September. So we have not budgeted to fill that full-time position until September of next year. When Megan, because right now Megan is doing our website work, she's doing our social media, and she's doing anything we ask her to do in the office. She's awesome at just stepping up. If we ask, she helped make the budget books. She helped do those things. And so what we are hoping to do is hire that administrative position as an economic development position, newsletter, website, social media, but also that person is one of our staff members and would be available to help as needed in administration. Any more questions on that? Okay, then I am going to turn it back to our chair, and I'm just going to quick that if you have questions, send them to me. I will answer them to the committee as a whole. I will be sending out the final summary budget prior to next Tuesday for your review. Thank you. Mayor?
Yep.
Thought I unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I say thank you, Ann, and thank you to all the staff. Those presentations were really helpful. I find this to be so valuable every year to understand where we're going and the pieces that need to be in there. And I appreciate your efforts, because we'll think of something probably after the meeting to send you our questions and then hear about them next time. Are there any other questions before we get to our final business? Okay, our final business of the night is to look at the minutes from last year's meeting, which is always one of those things that taxes our brains to think back. The minutes are towards the end of the book. Hopefully you looked at them ahead. I did look at them myself, and I did not see anything that needed to be changed. But if you could go to that section and at least quickly look at that. And I will ask while you're doing that, those that did look ahead, did anybody see anything they noted that was not correct or was missing. Okay, as you're doing that, and I don't want to rush you, but I will be entertaining a motion to approve those minutes.
So
as-
moved, Linda.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All right, so let's see, Sammy, so for this roll call again, then what's the plan? Hands for those we can see?
Let's do that. Is there
Okay,
all in favor?
hands up. I guess I got them in the right spot.
Okay, Paul Thompson,
Yes.
thank you. Jeff,
Yes.
thank you. And good.
Anyone- So everyone approved, so we don't have to ask about abstain or negate. All right, so that motion will pass, that the minutes are approved as distributed. And then I will say from there, we are adjourning the meeting at 8:19 p.m. So thank you all, and we will see you next week.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Bye.